I always thought it would be fun to grow up in Nate Saint's household. Nate's parents encouraged their 8 children to be very creative and adventurous. In fact, his dad helped the boys build a roller coaster in the backyard. Most of the time, the children could do anything they wanted. They could sleep in and go to school late. At dinner, they could skip their vegetables but have 2 desserts. There was really only one rule in the Saint household: to love and honor God. Sundays were set apart as a day for worship and reading the Bible. And there was a large jar of pennies in the kitchen, and the children could help themselves to a penny anytime they read a chapter of the Bible. So Nate grew up loving Jesus and learning to be a creative problem solver. He also grew up loving airplanes. Airplanes had only recently been invented, and while most adults had never been on an airplane, Nate got to go for his first ride when he was just 7 years old. His older brother Sam was a flying instructor and took Nate up for his first spin. Ever since, Nate dreamed of becoming an airplane pilot. Now we know God gives each of us different talents, different interests, because He has a special job for every one of us. And God was preparing Nate Saint to become one of the first missionary pilots. By the time Nate was a young man, he knew that God was calling him to be a missionary. What he didn't know was that there was going to be a need for missionaries who could fly and fix airplanes. Well, back before airplanes had been invented, it was very hard to support missionaries living in remote areas. If a missionary was living in the jungle and he or she or someone in their village got hurt, it might take days of people carrying them up and down the mountains or rowing across rivers until they could get to a doctor. So once Nate had all of his training to be a missionary, to be an airplane pilot and a mechanic, his family was asked to move to Ecuador to live on the edge of the Amazon jungle and support other missionaries living nearby. But before the other jungle missionaries could clear places for Nate to land his little yellow airplane, he would deliver food, medicine, and mail to them by pushing bags of supplies over the side of the plane. But not everything could be pushed over the side of an airplane, and sometimes in the rainforest, the ground was too muddy for it to be safe to land the airplane. So Nate needed to invent a new way to deliver supplies to the missionaries. In time, God helped him figure out what to do. It was called the bucket drop system. Nate tied a small bucket to a long rope at the back of his plane, and he found that if he flew in circles fast enough, the rope and bucket would hang straight down. Now, nothing could stop Nate from helping the many missionaries living nearby. Well, Nate and his wife Marge were excited to meet their Ecuadorian neighbors. The closest to them were the Quechua Indians, who were very friendly. But they often warned Nate and Marge about another native Indian group who were not so friendly. We now know them by the name they call themselves, the Waodani or Waorani. But back then, they were only known by the name the Quechua call them, Auca, which means naked savage. Naked because it was really hot in the rainforest. They didn't have a need to wear clothing. And savage because they usually killed anyone they met. The Auca were the most feared tribe in the Ecuadorian jungle, and no other native would cross the river into Auca territory. Not only did others fear the Auca, but the Auca lived in fear of each other. There were 3 Auca tribes, and they thought that if anything bad happened to someone, somebody else was responsible. So if an Auca got hurt or died, their family and friends would go on a hunt to kill whoever they thought was at fault. The Auca also did not like the white people. In the past, white people had kidnapped their children to make them slaves on farms. They had cut down the rainforests, killing the animals they needed to eat. And they polluted their fishing rivers when they were drilling for oil. People feared traveling anywhere near Auca territory because no one knew exactly where they lived. They didn't stay in one spot. They moved about the jungle anytime they needed more food or were running away from their enemies. While Nate and Marge were definitely cautious about the Alka, they were also knew that if anyone needed to learn about Jesus, it was the Alka. They wanted them to be able to stop living lives of fear and to be able to live lives of love. And because the Alka had so many enemies, Nate and Marge wanted to make sure that missionaries found them before anyone else. Well, Nate prayed for a way to find the Alka. He didn't know what the solution would be, but he was sure that his airplane would have something to do with the plan. We now know that God had a wonderful plan for the Waodani or Alka, but it's going to take me a few weeks to tell you this whole story. So be sure to tune in next week for the next chapter.